Hello and welcome to the Watchful Citizen, a local access program presented by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Today's guest is Nebraska State Senator Patty Pansing Brooks, representing Legislative District 28, which is in the central portion of the city of Lincoln in Lancaster County. Welcome, Senator Brooks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here, and I think the last time I was here, I was a candidate, so.
You were. Tell us a little bit about how the last year has gone for you and some highlights.
Well, you know, it has been such a privilege to get to do this and to be in this position. It is far more than I ever thought it was going to be, and I think it's such an honor to be able to be in a position where you have an opportunity to do something for people that you have no idea at some point in their lives if you'll affect somebody. But I know that there are things that we're able to do that will affect lives positively. And so that's really a blessing to me to be able to do that. And every day I'm thankful for all the people, for the work from the party, for all the people that were supportive and kind and got out and walked and called. And when I was pushing that button on some of the key votes last year that were so big, I felt the power of all those kind people that really did help me be in that position. I'm just the conduit. It truly is a seat of the people that people get to. It sounds corny, I think, but I really do believe that we have a wonderful system in the unicameral, and that people are represented by the work that they do. And so I really feel privileged to be there.
There were some big issues. You mentioned that. One of them was the repeal of the death penalty.
Yes.
And I believe you voted for that. Can you speak to that and the process a little bit about how you arrived at that?
Well, you know, it was an honor to be part of that vote. And again, as I say, I felt such strength from the people supporting me and the people who believe so passionately about that issue. It was a very somber issue, of course, and really to be there and a part of this ongoing effort, this decades effort of Senator Chambers, to be part of that was truly an honor. And to me, it's obviously and clearly the right thing to do to repeal that death penalty. That it's very clear that the death penalty is not a deterrent. We have case after case where we can prove that it was not a deterrent. We have also clear facts about how much more expensive it is to keep people on death row, and rather than doing something like life in prison without the possibility of parole. So, and then of course the fact that it's being applied discriminatorily across the nation, and the fact that we have people, 6 right here in Nebraska that we know of recently, that have been incorrectly convicted and subsequently exonerated at great cost to our state. So this is not a way that we should be marching forward, in my opinion.
Just to expand on that a little bit, there is going to be the repeal issue on the ballot in November of 2016. Do you have a sense of where Nebraskans are going with that?
You know, I don't think I was surprised at all that there were enough votes to put it on the ballot, but I really have great faith in Nebraska, and I truly believe that when Nebraskans are presented with the facts with which we all were presented, and when they know the actual costs of having somebody on death row and the actual costs of the appeals and the amount of work that it takes, and then the costs of the chance of incorrectly putting somebody to death on behalf of the state, which could have happened but for some very special things that happened legally with the Beatrice 6. And I just think that the chances, we have the most perfect legal system in the world, but it is also quite imperfect, and we have got to err on the side of making sure that we do not put somebody to death who's innocent, and we've got to quit sponsoring state state-sponsored murder. That's what I think that is. And we can put people away and assure that they never get out again. But this decision that we want to kill people and continue this, and it's supporting retribution rather than trying to put away those most dangerous in our society. So I'm really against it. I think that the people in Nebraska, I really do believe that they're going to learn the facts about this and vote to repeal the death penalty. And I think that, I'm not sure that I understand why the governor has taken this mission, but he has. But I think the people of Nebraska will think about it long and hard. And when you see the coalitions of the Catholic Church and the various groups that have come together on this, I truly believe that the people of Nebraska will decide we do not need to have this form of justice ever again in our state.
Excellent. I can tell you're very passionate about it.
I am.
There's some other big issues that are facing Nebraskans. Human trafficking is one of them that has been in the news lately. Are you involved in anything with human trafficking legislation?
I am. There are actually two bills that are two studies that have been sponsored by Senator Moorfield and Senator Campbell, which I have been active and involved in. Last year, I co-sponsored the bill by Senator Scheer that increased the penalties against the traffickers and the purchasers. And I just returned a few weeks ago from New York on a summit on human trafficking in the courts. And I went with Attorney General Peterson, Doug Peterson, and the court administrator, Judy Beitler, and we were, and also Court of Appeals Judge Francie Reedman. And we were looking at and listening to all sorts of people discussing human trafficking. And our Attorney General has focused on this, and this is something that we've been able to work together on quite strongly, and I'm very grateful because he said when he was running to be Attorney General in his campaign that human trafficking was one of the things that he cared most about, and he's really followed through on this. He's just released a strategic plan. He's hired Assistant Attorney General Stephen O'Meara to follow up and work on human trafficking. And I think this is the current scourge of our country and really the world. It's happening across the world. But the facts are staggering. Things are coming in more and more that we're understanding that it's happening at Nebraska football games. It's happening up at the Omaha World Series. And girls and young people are being trafficked. And we have to stand as Nebraskans and say that we no longer allow the sale and abuse of human flesh for profit. And the really disgusting thing is that it's the second it's the second most economically beneficial crime next to drug trafficking. And what the traffickers are realizing is that it's a reusable resource, that the girls' bodies are a reusable resource as opposed to drugs, which of course are consumed and used. So anyway, I think that we have to stand up as a society. We have to say no more to this. And and I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the social services area because these girls are highly abused, highly scared of law enforcement, scared of all that's been done to them by people in authority. And so we have to deal with the social services issues on one hand, but on the other hand, we have to turn this horrible crime off at its source. And that is, we have got to come down and start arresting, embarrassing the purchasers and the sellers of human flesh. And that's what's happening, and it's young girls that are having this done to them, and this is something that I feel very strongly about, and fortunately our Attorney General does too. He is planning on and going across the state with a strategic plan to try to inform law enforcement about the fact that we have got to have a sea change in our minds where the girls are no longer the offenders, but they're the victims. Very few times do you ever see a prostitute who's just selling herself by herself. somebody is managing her, somebody is getting the money, somebody is getting most of the resources and controlling her life. And so those girls are victims, and the true criminals, the people that we really need to be arresting, are the sellers and the purchasers of these young girls.
So are there not enough laws on the books now to catch the perpetrators, or are you thinking about more legislation needs to be introduced to strengthen those laws or to add laws?
We're looking at all the resources. We're hoping that the increase in penalties that occurred last year will be taken seriously. Of course, you can create those laws that toughen the penalties against the purchasers and the sellers, the traffickers and the purchasers, but until law enforcement and until county attorneys and all sorts of people take it seriously as well and start charging people. I liken it to the reform on drunk driving laws, and how in the 60s and when I was growing up, it was probably, people sort of turned a blind eye to drunk driving, and then all of a sudden Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and others really came out and said, this is it. And we're going to stop this. The first penalty will be a slap on the wrist, but from then on, people are embarrassed. People have true penalties against them, and we have got to do the exact same thing on human trafficking. So we really need to have
citizen action.
We do. We need
some type of pressure groups
yes.
on law enforcement too.
We do. We have to,
this.
and I wish there'd be a Mothers Against Human Traffickers that would stand up and say, no more. This is enough.
Very good. Another item that has been in the news lately has been expansion of Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Medicaid or Medicaid in Nebraska? Yeah. We have thousands of people who have fallen through the cracks. They don't qualify for one reason or the other under the Obamacare program. Can you talk to us about that a little bit? I know that Senator Kathy Campbell has been an advocate and working on that diligently. Are you involved in any of that? Or?
Senator Campbell and Senator McCollister from Omaha, both Republicans, have been working recently for this next year to try to get a version that would be what Nebraskans, I think, would care about. We are losing, I think the number is $2.6 billion by not expanding Medicaid at this point. And I just had somebody come into my office the day before yesterday saying her husband has been told by his doctor that he needs hip surgery. They make just above the limit, and so they are part of the working poor. And to be able to get that surgery, he would have to stop working. And he's worked in the same job for 30 years. And yet he would have to quit his job and go on welfare to be able to get the surgery that he needs. That just doesn't make any sense. And we need people working. We need a functioning society, and this is just not appropriate. Of course, we keep talking about the fact that we're paying for it in two other ways, which is higher premiums because people go to the emergency room, which is of course a way higher form of medical care than if they were under an insurance plan. And we're also paying for it by our federal dollars, which are paying for the states that have expanded Medicaid. So we are paying for it really twice and getting no benefits from it. So, it's easy to make it all political, make it all about our president, but this is something that Nebraskans need to understand should be done to help take care of the most vulnerable and people who are really struggling, but really also trying to work in our communities and in our society and trying to make a difference in their lives and not just depending on the government for everything. And when you think about the different kinds of exemptions and all of the other things that are available to all sorts of people, to say that this group of working poor is not deserving of insurance, I just don't understand it. I don't think it's kind, it isn't nice, it isn't the way Nebraska is. And we are losing $2.6 billion, not million, billion, as if we just have so much money to be able to spend. And the farmers want property tax relief. If we could get $2.6 billion inserted into our into our economy, think how that could help us. So I think it's really a shame, but I am really proud of the senators. Since I'm not on Health and Human Services, I'm only tangentially supportive of it. It's truly right now, Senator McAllister and Senator Campbell are working hard to come up with what they hope will finally be something that Nebraskans can accept, and they're going to take that across the state to try to get more support. Of course, the hospitals are totally supportive of this because they're running into great troubles with their charity care, the amount of charity care that they have to give. So,
with so much bipartisan support of expanding Medicaid in Nebraska, do you think that it has a good chance in the next session to get worked through?
I don't know. I keep having great hopes for the people that we have around us. I think if more and more people talk to their senators and talk about how could we even be talking about letting $2.6 billion, no matter what, and Senator Campbell's form of Medicaid expansion last year allowed us to opt out if it became too costly for the state. We could opt out. But
it's a win-win then.
Yes. Really. Meanwhile, we would get the federal dollars, and other states are using those.
The first few years.
Yeah, we've already
dropped down to 90.
Yeah, but we've
years.
lost a couple of the years of the 100%. So we are losing money by not doing this, significant dollars.
Important issue.
Yeah.
What are the things you've been working on in the last session that you'd like to talk about and let our viewers know what's been going on?
Well, it's been very interesting because I've been on education and judiciary. The issues are very big. When you think about the state's budget, there are really three big parts of the budget, and those are health and human services, education, and corrections. And so I feel, again, fascinated by two of the committees on which I am privileged to serve. And the issues regarding the corrections and what's happening with our correction system have been overwhelming but fascinating as well. And we have our work cut out for us still, trying to get the numbers and the overcrowding down, and to try to make sure that we are not just being tough on crime like the 90s. In the 90s, that was sort of the mantra, we should get tough on crime. Now we're realizing we need to be smart on crime, and that we need to use our prisons to put people in prison who are most dangerous to society. But we have to start figuring out programming and things, because I think it's 96%, something like 96% of inmates are returned to society. And if we haven't helped provide a pathway for them to get jobs or get training or get rid of their addictions or all of those things, then we're just going to cause more problems with our society and have increasing issues and start increasing the number of beds needed in the prisons. So it's really fascinating. And this next year, juvenile justice is one of the things that is something I've been really interested in. I've gone to a number of different seminars across the country, and there are some things with that I'm really interested in looking at some legislation on, including mandating that children have a right to an attorney. Right now, they can either waive it without knowledge or without an attorney present to explain to them what they're doing, or their parents can waive it. And that's not being allowed in some places without at least an attorney present. So, and of course, part of the problem is that people want to comply with law enforcement and help them, but they don't realize that whatever happens later really affects them on their ability to get a job if they end up getting a felony. And so we really need to look at some of those things and make sure that children, are most vulnerable, have representation in the courts. When I found out, I think that 66% of children generally have representation. That leaves, 34% that do not have representation. And those crimes stick with them the rest of their lives, and they're too young to make a knowledgeable, informed decision about whether or not they need an attorney. So that's one thing. There are states that have a minimum age at which a child can be charged with a felony. So there's all sorts of, and we have a 9-year-old, I think, right now that has been charged with a felony. It's what I've been told recently. And there was a 4-year-old. So at some point, you have to say, okay, we need to figure out how to handle these young people and how to best help them to grow into healthy, strong, contributing members of our society.
The federal government recently said that they were going to release about 6,000 federal nonviolent people from the system. Do you think that starting at the federal government will affect the states at some point where we start maybe duplicating what the federal government is doing? I don't know what the state is.
Yes, well, and I think what we're
stand.
looking at is trying to make sure that we have strong community correction systems so that the inmates are allowed to do work release and do different things that allow them to really function and pay back. We used to have a much stronger system where they'd be working and help pay back the victims or the state for their duration and their stay while incarcerated. So there are some really good programs, and we're looking at a number of them, and I have, again, great hopes that we're going to take this by the horns and really do some things that will have positive outcomes for us. So
we have millions and millions of people who have been released, but once they get out, they have they've paid their dues to society, but they continue to pay by not being able to vote, not being able to get jobs.
A job.
Housing, sometimes they're denied that. Sometimes families don't want to step up and help these people.
Accept them back.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for them to drop back into criminal activity and then get back.
And there's
back
some
in the
really
system.
wonderful programs going on. There's a trade program going on out at the Center for People in Need right now that is working on training in a number of different fields, and including construction and warehouse management. And so it's helping to train people to, when they get out, to be able to train them to be able to have something marketable and have a skill that they can use to help support themselves once they're free. So we've got to look at those kinds of things, and you know, the old idea of just locking somebody up and throwing away the key is exactly that. It's an old, outdated idea. It has not worked for our society, and we have got to be much smarter on justice.
So we have another session of the unicameral coming up, I believe in January. What plans do you have for introducing legislation or supporting legislation that you know that's coming up?
Well, I think that again, this is a short session, so it's of course my first short session. So I hear some of it's difficult to get a lot of new work coming forward. I have also heard that that we're having sort of a shortfall with our budget. That the latest is that we're 134 million short. So you know, there are people talking about, including the governor, cutting property taxes and income taxes. And meanwhile, as I said, we have these 3 big pressures on our budget, which are corrections, which truly needs fixing before we find ourselves with some lawsuit, and education and health and human services. And we know that those are 3 departments that really are in a lot of need. So we have got to look carefully at what's going on before we start planning on cutting too much. We have to make sure that we can meet the needs of those 3 areas as well as others. But you know, education funding is always a hot topic, and what we need to do is make sure that we have equity in our taxation. And of course, if we do anything raising the sales tax, that becomes a regressive tax, which is harder on people who are of lower income or in poverty. And again, 36% of the people in my district live at or below 25,000 household income. So poverty is a huge issue for the people in my district. And so as I fight for them and for their needs, looking at what we can do to make sure that policies are fair for all people, including those that are more voiceless and have the greatest needs and don't have great advocates or the money to be able to buy great advocates for them. We have got to speak out and stand for them.
Speaking of speaking out, you represent the citizens of Legislative District 28 in Lincoln, but actually you work for all of the citizens of the state of Nebraska. How do you communicate with them, and how can they reach you? And we've just got a couple more minutes before we need to wrap up. Give us some idea of how citizens can talk with you.
Well, certainly I get lots of letters, so many people do know to send emails. It's ppanzingbrooks@leg.ne.gov, so any of your senators will be happy to have emails or letters. Also, people are welcome to call from all over the state, and as I've made comments here and there about taxation and different policies, I've heard from a lot of people from around the state. But it's so important. The other thing that I want to remind people is that in this fabulous unicameral that we have, they are the second house. The people are the second house. And if people would come and speak before the hearings, that is the way for the people to really have some power. And there were many instances where people coming and speaking at our committee hearings made more difference than anything, more difference than any information from lobbyists. It's very powerful to have people come and speak to us and to tell us what they care about and what they think. So I really do encourage people to come, find out when the hearings are, or call your state senator and say, I care about this issue, and they'll help tell you when those hearings might occur.
And are they going to be posted on your website as well at some point, or is it just best to call?
If you call, then we can help. You know, they are listed on the state's website because there's too many hearings to be able to list them. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Patty Panzing Brooks, for joining us today. We hope you'll come back again soon. It's always a very informative interview. That is our show for today. Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Watchful Citizen, presented by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Our show airs Tuesday nights at 10:30 p.m., Wednesday nights at 6 p.m., and Saturdays at 12:30. Time Warner Cable Channel 13 is the channel that you need to look for to watch our program. Thank you for watching, and tune in next week for another edition of The Watchful Citizen. Thanks,
Thank you.
Patty.